The Greyhound dropped something at Duke Alaric's polished boots. A torn lace handkerchief monogrammed, perfumed, and unmistakably belonging to Lady Isolde, the woman he was to wed by Sunday. But the scent clinging to the silk wasn't hers. It was his brother's cologne. Who slipped from her chambers before dawn, and why was a dog the only soul brave enough to tell him? If forbidden love and Regency secrets stir something in you, subscribe now, because the truth, dear viewer, bites deeper than you think. 3 mornings before his wedding, Duke Alaric Thorne stood at the tall library window and watched the mist crawl across the Wexley lawns. The handkerchief was still in his coat pocket. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had simply held the silk between his fingers all night, as if the scent clinging to it might change by morning. It had not. Bramble lay at his feet, ears twitching at every small sound the old house made. The Greyhound had been his since the dog was a clumsy pup, a gift from his late father on the morning of his 18th birthday. A hound knows truth before a man does, his father had said that day. Alaric had laughed then. He was not laughing now. "Your Grace," came a soft voice from the doorway. Mrs. Pellinore stepped into the library, her tea-tray rattling more than usual. The housekeeper had served 3 generations of Thorns, and she could read his face better than any priest. "You have not touched a thing since last evening," she said gently. "Shall I send for the physician?" "No. Your brother is asking for you. He is in the breakfast room." Alaric did not turn from the window. "Tell Lysander I am occupied. He says it is urgent." "Everything with Lysander is urgent," he murmured, his voice flatter than he meant it to sound. He saw the housekeeper flinch at the edge of his vision and softened a little. "Forgive me, Pellinore. I shall come down shortly." She set the tray on the side table and lingered, the way old servants do when they scent something terrible but cannot name it. "Your Grace," she said carefully, "Lady Isolde sent word this morning. She asks to ride with you at 11. She says she has something to confess." Something to confess. The handkerchief seemed to grow heavier in his pocket. He had loved Isolde Marchmont since they were children, before titles and duty and the slow grinding politeness of grown lives. He had courted her through 3 London seasons. He had written her letters she kept tied with green ribbon in a box beneath her bed. He had imagined, foolishly, that he knew every quiet corner of her heart. And now a dog had taught him otherwise. "Tell her I shall meet her at the stables," he said. When the housekeeper had gone, he knelt down and ran his hand along Bramble's narrow head. The Greyhound looked up at him with that grave, patient gaze hounds have, the one that suggests they have been waiting their whole lives for you to finally understand. "Where did you find it, old fellow?" he whispered. "What corridor, what hour, what door did she leave open?" Bramble only thumped his tail once against the rug. The clock in the hall struck 10. Somewhere above, a door closed too quietly to be innocent. Alaric rose to his feet and felt the cold weight of his name settle on his shoulders again. Duke of Wexley. Master of 3 estates. Heir to a bloodline that had outlived kings. And a man, this morning, who did not yet know whether his bride had betrayed him with his own brother or with some cleverer ghost he had not yet seen. He buttoned his coat over the handkerchief and stepped into the corridor. Lysander was already on the staircase, smiling that easy smile he had been smiling since boyhood, the one that had charmed governesses and creditors alike. "Alaric," he said warmly, "there you are. I was beginning to think you meant to hide from your own wedding." Alaric looked at him for a long moment, looked at the cut of his coat, the faint shadow beneath his eyes, the smell of him. "Brother," he said softly, "where were you last night?" Lysander's smile did not falter, but somewhere behind it something flickered. And from the hall below, the great front doors swung open, and a familiar voice called his name. Lady Isolde Marchmont stood in the doorway, her riding habit dusted with morning damp, her cheeks bright from the cold. She pulled off her gloves one finger at a time, and when she looked up the staircase, her eyes found Alaric's before they found anyone else's. They always had. "You are early," he said. "I could not wait," she answered. Behind him, Lysander shifted on the step. The movement was small. A man adjusting his coat, perhaps. A man wishing he were elsewhere. Alaric felt it the way a hunter feels a deer move in the brush. "Lysander," he said without turning, "leave us." "Of course," came the smooth reply. "Lady Isolde, always a pleasure." The greyhound trotted out of the library and stopped at the top of the stairs, ears pricked, watching Lysander descend. As Lysander passed her in the entry, Bramble's lip pulled back, just slightly, in something that was not quite a snarl. Isolde took a small step away from him. It was the smallest thing in the world. A breath, a flinch. But Alaric saw it, and his stomach turned to iron. "Come," he said to her, "walk with me." He did not offer his arm. They moved through the long gallery in silence, past the painted Thorns who had ruled this house for 200 years. Isolde's slippers made no sound on the marble. She was lovely this morning. She was always lovely. That was the cruelty of it. "Alaric," she said at last. Her voice was thin. "I have something I must tell you, before Sunday, before the vows. I should have spoken sooner. I am a coward, and I have been one for a long time." He stopped walking. "Go on," he said. She turned to face him. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was steady. Whatever she had come to say, she had rehearsed it in front of a mirror, perhaps for weeks. He recognized the look. He had worn it himself more times than he cared to count. "There is a letter," she said, "in my chambers, beneath the loose board by the window. I never meant for you to read it. But if you do not read it, you will marry me believing things that are not true, and I cannot live as your wife under a lie. I cannot." A letter. "Whose hand?" he asked. His voice did not sound like his own. She opened her mouth to answer, and then, from somewhere deep in the house, a woman screamed. It was not a small scream. It was the kind that empties a room of air. Alaric was running before he knew he had moved, down the gallery, through the saloon, past the startled face of a footman who flattened himself against the wall. The scream came again, sharper now, and he knew the voice. Mrs. Pellinore. He took the servants' stairs 2 at a time and burst into the east wing where the family slept. The door to his own bedchamber was open. His desk had been torn apart, drawers pulled out, papers thrown across the rug like leaves. The portrait of his mother had been lifted off the wall and set carelessly against a chair, and the little wall safe behind it stood open and empty. Mrs. Pellinore was on her knees beside the bed, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching at the bedpost, as if the floor itself had betrayed her. "Your Grace," she whispered, "your father's letters. The seal is gone." He could not breathe. There were 3 things in that safe. A pouch of gold sovereigns, which still lay scattered on the rug, untouched. A ring his grandfather had worn at Waterloo. And a packet of letters bound in black cord that his father had pressed into his hand the night he died. "Burn these if you must," his father had rasped, "but never let them out of this house. Never let them out of Thorn blood." The pouch was there. The ring was there. The letters were gone. Behind him, soft footsteps. Isolde stood in the doorway with one hand against the frame, her face the colour of paper. Her eyes moved across the ransacked room and settled on the empty safe, and something passed over her features that he could not name. It was not surprise. That was the worst part. It was not surprise. "You knew," he said quietly. No, she breathed. Alaric, no, I swear to you. Bramble appeared at his side, panting softly. The greyhound padded into the room, sniffed once at the overturned papers, then walked straight to the open window and stood there, looking out across the south lawn, his whole long body gone still and pointed as a drawn bow. Alaric crossed to him. In the soft earth of the flower bed below, fresh and clear in the morning damp, was a single boot print. A man's boot, long, narrow, the kind a gentleman wore. And pressed into the print, half hidden in the soil, was a button, silver, engraved with a small, familiar crest. His brother's. Alaric bent down and lifted the button from the earth. It was cold against his palm, Lysander's crest. The little hawk in flight that their father had given each son on his coming of age, engraved with their initials on the back. He turned it over. The letter L was scratched faintly into the silver. He closed his hand around it until the edge bit into his skin. Behind him, Isolde had not moved from the doorway. She was watching him, the way one watches a man holding a lit fuse. "Tell me about the letter," he said, without turning. "Not here," she whispered. "Then where?" "The folly by the lake. At noon. Come alone. And, Alaric, please, whatever you find before then, do not act on it. Not yet. You do not see the whole of this." He turned to look at her. She was trembling, not weeping, trembling the way small animals tremble in the moment before they bolt. He wanted to cross the room and take her by the shoulders and shake the truth out of her. He wanted to gather her against his chest and tell her he forgave her for whatever it was, before he even knew what it was. He did neither. "Go," he said. She went. Mrs. Pellinore was still on the floor. He helped her up gently and asked her to fetch Coombs, his father's old steward, who had served the Thorns for 40 years and trusted no one under 50. "Tell him to come to the south study," he said. "Tell him to bring the household ledger and tell no one else, not a footman, not a maid, not a soul." "Yes, your grace." "And Pellinore," he paused. "If Lysander asks where I am, you have not seen me." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "I have served this house since before your brother could walk, your grace. I know whose boy he is, and I know whose boy you are." She left. Coombs arrived within the quarter hour, a tall, stooped man with white whiskers and eyes that missed nothing. Alaric set the button on the desk between them. Coombs looked at it, then up at Alaric, and said nothing for a long moment. "Your father," Coombs said at last, "made me swear something on his deathbed. I remember. He made me swear that if those letters ever left this house I was to tell you a name. He hoped I would never have to, but he made me swear. Tell me." Coombs drew a slow breath. "Cassivelan Vexley, Lord Vexley of Hartmoor. He keeps a house in Berkeley Square and another at the edge of Wexley land that your father never permitted to be entered. If the letters are moving, they are moving toward him. Your father called him the patient wolf. He said the wolf had waited 20 years for a thorn to grow careless." Alaric stared at the button. A name from his childhood. Lord Vexley had come once to Wexley Hall when Alaric was 9, a thin, pale man with very white hands who had smiled too much and stayed for tea and made his mother weep in the corridor afterwards. His father had ordered the gates locked behind the man's carriage that same night. "Where is Lysander now?" Alaric asked. "He rode out an hour ago. He took the bay mare and went west, toward Hartmoor. Saddle Orion, quietly, and Coombs. He met the old man's eyes. If I am not back by sundown, you take Mrs. Pellinore and the dog and the household ledger, and you ride to my aunt in Bath. You do not wait. You do not send word. You go." "Yes, your grace." Alaric was halfway to the stables when she found him. Not Isolde, a small figure in a dark cloak, hood pulled low, slipping out from the hedge by the kitchen garden, as if she had been waiting there for hours. She caught his sleeve with a thin gloved hand. "Your Grace," she whispered, "forgive me. My name is Endelian Marchmont. I am Isolde's younger sister. We have not been introduced, but I must speak with you before you ride." He knew the name. Isolde had spoken of her, the sister sent away to a cousin's estate in Cornwall after some scandal no one would name. She was perhaps 17. Her face was very pale and very serious, and she had Isolde's eyes, only sharper. "My sister did not write that letter," Endelian said quickly. "She did not write it, and she did not send it. I know because I was there the night it was written, and I know whose hand held the pen. But if I tell you here, in the open, we will both be dead by nightfall. Your brother is not the wolf, your Grace. He is the lamb being led, and so is she." Alaric stared at her. From the great house behind them, he heard the front doors open, heard boots on the gravel, heard a voice he did not recognize, asked the footman, in a smooth and unhurried tone, whether the Duke of Wexley was at home to a Lord Vexley. Endelian's grip tightened on his sleeve. "He is here," she breathed. "He is already here." Alaric pulled Endelian behind the hedge and pressed a finger to his lips. Through a gap in the leaves he could see the front steps. A black carriage stood in the drive with no crest on the door. A driver in plain dark livery sat very still on the box. And on the gravel, brushing rain from the shoulder of a long grey coat, stood Lord Vexley. He had not aged. That was the first thing Alaric thought. 20 years, and the man's face was the same pale, unlined thing it had been when he was 9. Only the hair was whiter. The smile was the same. The smile his father had locked the gates against. "Tell me everything," Alaric whispered. "Quickly." Endelian spoke very fast. "Vexley has been writing to Isolde for 2 years, your Grace, pretending to be a friend of our late father's. He told her he had letters that would ruin your house unless she helped him. He told her your father had ordered our mother's death. He told her your brother knew. She did not believe him at first. Then he sent her a page from your father's hand, in your father's writing, and she did not know what to think. She has been sick with it. She wrote to me in Cornwall, and I came back 2 nights ago. The handkerchief Bramble found, your Grace, it was not from her chamber. Lysander took it. He has been pretending to court her in secret, in front of the servants, so that when the scandal broke it would look like an affair between them, and not what it is. What is it then? Vexley wants the letters because they prove your father did not kill our mother. They prove Vexley did. And your father held that proof for 20 years because using it would have destroyed both families. Lysander found that out 3 months ago. He has been trying to protect Isolde and protect you and protect the name all at once with no one to help him. He stole the letters this morning, your Grace. He stole them before Vexley's man could. He left the button so you would chase him and not Vexley. He thought you would catch him first. He thought he could explain. Alaric closed his eyes. The whole shape of the last 3 days turned over in his mind, like a card being flipped. The brother he had nearly cursed in the gallery. The bride he had nearly cast off in the bedchamber. The dog at his feet, who had not been trying to expose a betrayal, but to drag him toward a truth he had been too proud to see. "Forgive me," he murmured to no one. A voice on the gravel called his name. "Wexley," Lord Vexley said, in that smooth, unhurried tone. "I know you are at home. Your housekeeper is a poor liar. Come out, my boy. Let us speak as gentlemen. I have come to return a button I believe belongs to your brother, and to collect something that belongs to me." Alaric pressed the silver button hard into his palm. "Stay here," he said to Endelian. "If I do not come back in 10 minutes, you take the kitchen path to the stables and you ride for Bath. Coombs will know. Your Grace, live, Endelian. Whatever happens, live." He stepped out from behind the hedge. Lord Vexley turned slowly. His face brightened with that same warm smile, as if they were old friends meeting in a club. "Ah," he said, "there you are. You have your father's eyes. I always said so. Walk with me a little, would you? The roses are quite fine this year." Alaric walked. They moved together along the gravel sweep, away from the house, away from the open door, away from the footman who stood frozen with a tray of calling cards in his hand. Vexley's driver did not move on the box. Alaric noted, very calmly, that the man's right hand rested inside his coat. "You have something of mine," Vexley said pleasantly. "I have nothing of yours." "Your brother does then. It is the same thing. A packet of letters, black cord, your father's seal. I would like them back. I have been very patient, you see. 20 years, patient. I would prefer not to be patient any longer." Alaric stopped walking. He looked at the pale, smiling man who had killed his mother, who had spent 2 decades poisoning his bride, who had nearly turned him against his own blood inside the space of a single morning. And he felt something inside his chest go very quiet and very cold, the way a lake goes quiet just before it freezes solid. "You came onto Thornland," he said softly, "and you asked for my brother's life and my wife's name and my father's secret, all in one breath." Vexley's smile thinned. "I asked for letters, boy." "No," Alaric said. "You asked for everything, and you will leave here with nothing." He raised his hand. From the open library window high above them, the long grey shape of Bramble came over the sill in one clean, silent leap, landed on the gravel without a sound, and was already running. The driver moved his hand inside his coat. Alaric was faster. He stepped in and struck the man across the temple with the silver button still clenched in his fist, and the man went sideways off the box like a sack of meal. Vexley reached for something inside his own coat. Bramble hit him in the chest. Vexley went down hard on the gravel, with 60 pounds of Greyhound on his chest. The pistol he had been drawing skidded across the drive and stopped at the foot of one of the marble lions that flanked the front steps. Bramble did not bite. He simply stood there, all 4 paws planted, his long nose 2 inches from the man's throat, and he held him with the patient, unblinking stillness of a creature who had been waiting his whole life for permission. Lord Vexley did not move. Alaric walked over and picked up the pistol. He uncocked it. He weighed it in his hand for a moment, and then he set it gently on the edge of the lion's plinth, the way a man sets down a teacup. He looked down at the pale, unlined face on the gravel. "You will get up," he said, "and you will walk to your carriage, and you will go to London. You will go to my solicitor in Lincoln's Inn before sundown. You will sign a confession of what you did to my mother in the spring of your 1806. You will sign it in your own hand, and then you will sail, Lord Vexley, to wherever you like. India, the Cape, the colonies, I do not care. But if you ever set foot on English soil again, the letters my father kept for 20 years will be in the hands of every paper in London by the following morning, and your name will be a thing children spit at. Do you understand me?" Vexley's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I understand you," he said hoarsely. "Bramble," Alaric said softly. The Greyhound stepped back 1 pace. Vexley got to his feet. He did not brush the gravel from his coat. He did not look at Alaric again. He climbed into the carriage and shut the door himself, and after a long moment, the driver, who had crawled back onto the box with blood at his temple, gathered the reins, and the carriage moved away down the long drive in the soft grey rain. Alaric watched until it passed through the gates. Then his knees nearly gave. A hand caught his elbow. Lysander, mud on his boots, and the packet of black corded letters pressed against his chest under his coat, breathing hard as if he had ridden all the way from Hartmoor and back. His face was the face Alaric remembered from boyhood, before titles. before the slow, careful distance that grown brothers learn. "I was coming back," Lysander said. "I swear to you, Alaric, I was bringing them to you. I only meant to draw him off." "I know," Alaric said. "You know. I know now." Lysander's mouth twisted, and he turned his face away quickly, and Alaric pretended not to see. He put his hand on his brother's shoulder and left it there. Isolde came down the front steps in her riding habit, with Endelion at her side and Missis Pellinore behind them both, and Coombs behind her with the household ledger still tucked under one arm, as if he had not been able to put it down. Isolde stopped 3 paces from Alaric. She did not come closer. She had been weeping, and she had stopped, and she stood very straight in the wet gravel like a woman waiting to be sentenced. "I should have told you," she said. "The first letter, the first lie. I should have come to you and put it in your hands and trusted you to be the man you have always been. I was afraid. I was small. I am sorry, Alaric. I will release you from the engagement. You owe me nothing." He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he crossed the gravel and took her face in both of his hands. Her skin was cold. He could feel her trembling under his palms. "Isolde," he said, "you walked into my house this morning to tell me the truth, when you could have walked into my house this morning and married me and never told me at all. That is not smallness. That is the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. Sunday still stands, if you will have me." She closed her eyes, and a single tear went down her cheek, and she nodded, just once. They were married on the Sunday, in the small chapel on the Wexley grounds, with Endelion holding the flowers, and Lysander standing as his brother's man, and Mrs. Pellinore weeping audibly in the second pew. Bramble lay across the chapel doorway in a patch of sun, and let no stranger pass. Lord Vexley signed the confession in Lincoln's Inn before sundown that same week. He sailed from Portsmouth on a Tuesday. The papers wrote the following spring that an English gentleman of that name had died of a fever in Calcutta. No one in Wexley Hall wore black. Endelion stayed. She was given the east rooms that looked over the lake, and she grew tall and sharp and very clever, and she rode out most mornings with the Duke and Duchess of Wexley, and the long grey shape of Bramble running ahead of all 3 horses. A year later, on a soft autumn afternoon, a letter arrived at the gates of Wexley Hall. No crest, no return, only Alaric's name in a hand he did not recognise. Bramble carried it in from the gravel drive and laid it at his master's boots in the library, exactly as he had laid down a torn lace handkerchief once before. Alaric looked down at the dog. Bramble looked back, patient and grave. Outside, somewhere beyond the hedges, the wind shifted. Alaric bent to pick up the letter. The seal was plain red wax with no impression in it. Alaric turned the letter over in his hands. The paper was good, heavy, expensive. The hand on the front was small and very even, the kind of writing taught by a careful tutor a long time ago. He did not recognise it, and yet something in the curve of the A in his own name pulled at him in a way he could not name. Isolde came into the library with a shawl around her shoulders and a small round shape beneath the fold of her gown that had begun, in the last month, to be no longer possible to hide. She stopped when she saw his face. "What is it?" she said. "A letter. From whom? I do not know yet." She came and stood beside him, and her hand found his without looking, and they stood that way for a long, quiet moment in the autumn light from the tall window. Bramble settled on the rug at their feet, grey muzzle on his paws, and watched them both with that grave, patient gaze the old Greyhound had worn since the morning of the handkerchief. Alaric broke the seal. There were 3 lines inside, only 3. The wolf had a son. The son has my eyes. He is 15 years old, and he is on a ship from Calcutta, and he is asking for you. There was no signature. Alaric read it again. He read it a 3rd time. He folded the paper very carefully along its original crease and set it on the desk. He looked out across the south lawn where the leaves were turning, where Endelion was riding her bay mare in long, slow circles around the lake, her dark hair loose, 16 now and almost a woman, laughing at something Lysander had called to her from the bank. "A son," Isolde said softly. She had read it over his shoulder. "A son who has done nothing," Alaric said, "who has been somewhere across the world for 15 years and knows nothing of any of this, who is coming to England because he has nowhere else, and whose father killed your mother." "Yes." She was quiet for a long time. Then she put her hand very gently on the small round shape beneath her gown. "This child of ours," she said, "if the world were just, would be born into a house where no door was ever closed against a boy who had done nothing." He looked at her. "The world is not just," he said. "No," she said, "but this house can be." Alaric closed his eyes. He thought of his father, who had held a terrible truth for 20 years, because using it would have ruined 2 families. He thought of Lysander, who had carried his guilt across 3 months alone to keep them all safe. He thought of Isolde at the threshold on the morning of the handkerchief, walking in to tell him a truth that would have cost her everything. He thought of a small grey hound dropping a torn piece of silk at his boots and looking up at him with the patient eyes of a creature who already knew what kind of man his master was, and was only waiting for the master to remember. "A hound knows truth before a man does," his father had said. So does a wife, Alaric thought now. So does a brother. So does a sister-in-law of 17 who steps out from behind a hedge to save a stranger's life. So does an old housekeeper who stands at a tea tray and chooses, after 40 years, the boy she will lie for. So does a steward who keeps a deathbed promise. The world is full of quiet people standing at doorways with the truth in their hands, hoping the proud man inside will be brave enough to take it. He had nearly not been. He opened his eyes. "Send word to Portsmouth," he said. "I want to know the day his ship lands. Send word to my solicitor in Lincoln's Inn. I want a room prepared in the east wing, the one that looks over the lake." Isolde smiled. It was a small smile, and a tired one, but it was the one she had smiled at him when they were children, before any of this, before titles and duty and the slow grinding politeness of grown lives. And he had not seen it on her face in a very long time. She kissed him. Then she went to find Endelion, and the autumn afternoon moved on, and Bramble sighed the long sigh old hounds sigh when their work for the day is done, and somewhere very far away on a grey sea, a 15-year-old boy with pale, unlined hands stood at the rail of a ship and watched the lights of a coast he had never seen come up out of the dark. He did not know whose house he was sailing toward. He did not know that a greyhound was waiting on a gravel drive. He did not know that a duke who had once nearly cursed his own blood had learned, in the space of 3 days, that betrayal is rarely what it looks like in the first morning light, and that the bravest thing a man can do is set down the handkerchief in his pocket and listen to the people who love him. If this story moved something in you, dear viewer, tell me in the comments. Have you ever held a small piece of evidence in your hand and been certain, absolutely certain, of the worst thing about someone you loved, only to learn later you had been wrong? Did you have the courage to say you were sorry? Did they have the courage to forgive you? I would like to know, and if you would like to walk with me into the next story, where a boy with pale, unlined hands steps off a ship at Portsmouth and a greyhound lifts its head on a gravel drive 100 miles away, please subscribe to the channel. There is more to come. There is always more to come. Until then, dear one, be brave at your own doorways.